Today is Holy Thursday. Maundy Thursday is what it's often referred to as, and it's a powerful day. It's a day that's just so packed with powerful movements and things that Jesus did for us. If you guys have been with us over the past couple of days, you know that we've been examining the life and ministry in this last week, this Holy Week, and everything leading up to the crucifixion and ultimately concluding with the resurrection and what that really means for us as believers. On Thursday, this is a day that's very weighty because this is when he has the Lord's Supper with his disciples. This is a powerful moment because what we recognize is that as he's sitting at the table with his disciples and he has so much to share with them and preparing them for a life of ministry without him, it's a weighty moment, and he washes their feet. He has prayer moments, these powerful moments. But I think one of the most significant things we see that takes place on Thursday is honestly found in Matthew chapter 26. It's when he institutes the Lord's Supper. Many of us may be familiar with that passage of scripture where he says, "This is my body, which is broken for you. Take and eat and do this in remembrance of me." He then follows that up with, "Hey, I want you to drink this, and this is symbolic of my blood, which is shed for you. Take and drink and do this in remembrance of me." What Jesus was doing is he was activating this idea of a new covenant. And here's what that means. For these men that were sitting at the table, they were all familiar with the varying things that was connected to their Jewish customs in order for them to remember God. The varying feasts, the varying holy days, everything leading up to this idea of being in a relationship with God, of remembering what God has done for them. So Jesus is bringing in a new idea, a new expression of how we can remember the goodness of God. This powerful moment is then capstoned with them singing worship music together. Who can imagine Jesus singing worship with his disciples? After he finished singing worship with them, scripture says that he goes out and he prays. He goes to this place called the Garden of Gethsemane, this place that is weighty, and some of the disciples are waiting off. They're tired. It's been a long day. But he brings 3 disciples with him into this very intimate place where he begins to pray, and it says that he wrestles in prayer. He's processing this weighty moment. And he asks his disciples, he said, "Hey, can you stay up and pray with me?" Have you ever been at a place where you just felt like the world was closing in on your shoulders? There's been so much weight that's been placed upon you, and you just want someone to pray with you. They're exhausted. They're feeling the grief in the moment and still trying to wrap their minds around what's about to take place. And so in this moment, they fall asleep and Jesus goes back. Many of us are familiar with this idea of Jesus saying, "Lord, if there's any other way, if there's any other way to fulfill this promise of bringing redemption to mankind without me giving up my life, man, I would love to go that route, but nevertheless, not my will, your will be done." Friends, I tell you that there's probably not a more powerful prayer that we can pray. It's one of vulnerability, but it's ultimately one of profound trust, where we can say to ourselves, "Lord, I want to go a different route, God, and I want to do things, and this is my strategy, but nevertheless, not my will, your will be done." The scriptures tell us that angels came and strengthened Jesus in this moment, and he continued to pray. But what becomes more interesting is while he's in prayer, his prayer is interrupted as he finds himself surrounded by men that Judas had led to him in an effort to arrest him. We talked about it yesterday on how Judas was the one who betrayed him and looked for an opportunity to seize Jesus when there wasn't a crowd. And now that moment has come. Jesus is arrested and Peter cuts off a man's ear. It's a lot of chaos and confusion. And ultimately, Jesus is now being led away to his first illegal trial. One of the most significant statements that I see in this passage of scripture is that statement where it says that they all were scattered, that everybody left, that Jesus is now alone and being carted away in this deep moment where it says, "And Peter began to follow at a distance." Peter began to follow at a distance. That when he began to recognize that following Jesus can come with consequences, when he began to recognize that following Jesus can lead to restrictions, that Peter followed at a distance. He didn't want to be too close to him. Jesus sees that Peter is following from a distance. Jesus is finding himself before one person after another, and he's feeling with this weight. And then Peter is confronted, and Peter denies Christ. We see all these things just spilling out right in front of us. It's such a dramatic and powerful moment that's exhaustive and weighty, and for us to witness it, it's just hard for us to even imagine it. But Jesus is in this moment. Peter denies him, and now he finds himself before Pilate, the Roman governor, who ultimately is the only one who has the ability to condemn someone to death. He acknowledges that there's nothing wrong with Jesus. He sees that man, these are issues with Jewish customs. This has nothing to do with law, has nothing to do with anything that's in my jurisdiction, but the pressure continues to come on him. He has a conversation with Jesus, and he begins to talk to him about this idea of truth. Pilate poses this existential question that many people are still pondering to this day. What is truth? Jesus says that I am. But Pilate is confused. He's seeing that this man is declaring himself to be truth in a world where there's so many different gods and so many different expressions. And the Roman government allowed people to express themselves as creatively and spiritually as they wanted. But now here's Jesus throwing down the gauntlet and saying that I am the truth. He goes back to the people that are surrounding him, and Pilate says, man, I find nothing wrong with him. And there's this moment of where he says he declares that he is king, he declares that he is the truth, and all the Pharisees and all the people that were opposing Jesus had taken the truth and put it into the hands of the Roman government. I hope that you just caught that. The religious people took the truth and put it into the hands of a politician. That's when things began to fall apart. What I believe for us, friends, is that we have an opportunity to be people of God, that we are the ambassadors of truth, that we are the holders of truth, that we are the expressors of truth, that we find ourselves in alignment with the truth. See, on this powerful Thursday that leads up to the crucifixion, this discussion about truth and what do we do with it and whose hands do we place it in is one that we continue to wrestle with to this day. Jesus is alone, he's isolated, he's dealt with all this ridicule, and he knows that it's leading him to a place where he's going to give up his life. And why would he do this? Love. Because the road to redemption is paved with love. Let's see this full expression of love come to its fulfillment in the next couple of days.